Introducing the Mise En Place Culture First podcast, where operational excellence begins and ends with you. Let's get started.
In the culinary world, mise en place means everything in its place. It is the invisible infrastructure that allows a kitchen to survive a brutal Friday night rush without collapsing into absolute chaos. But at HRB Universal, we believe that exact same principle applies to leadership. True operational excellence, compliance, and guest safety are never accidents. They are meticulously prepped. Welcome back to the Mise En Place Culture First podcast, the show designed specifically for hospitality owners, operators, and managers who want to move past the superficial checklist and build a non-negotiable standard of excellence. Today, we are launching into a critical deep dive that hits your bottom line exactly where it hurts. Supervision under Chapter 2 of the 2022 FDA Food Code. We aren't just talking about keeping an eye on the line. We are pulling back the curtain on clipboard supervision, FDA rules, and state point deductions explained. When a health inspector walks through your back door, the very first thing they look for isn't the temperature of your walk-in. It's the presence, knowledge, and active control of your person in charge. PIC. Under the 2022 FDA standards, supervision is a non-negotiable core intervention. If your PIC cannot demonstrate knowledge, or if they fail to actively monitor critical food safety duties, you aren't just looking at a minor citation, you are looking at massive, immediate state point deductions that can tank your inspection score and put your brand's reputation on the line. In this episode, we are going to break down the exact definition of a person in charge, PIC, under Section 2 to 101.11. The three core pillars: inspector's grade, presence, demonstration of knowledge, and duties. How state regulatory agencies translate FDA guidelines into devastating point deductions on your inspection report. How to transition your management style from passive firefighting to active managerial control. If you want to protect your food service license, secure your brand, and keep your doors open, you have to get your leadership in place. Turn up the volume, grab your notepad, and let's get into the prep with our host this week.
What if I told you that a restaurant with a completely pristine kitchen, like perfectly cooked food and zero biological hazards, could just instantly fail a health inspection?
I mean, people assume it's all about the food, but it really isn't.
Right. They get slapped with a C grade before the inspector even, pulls the thermometer out of their pocket.
Oh yeah, happens all the time.
I want you to picture it. You walk into your absolute favorite local spot on a Friday night.
Yeah.
The energy is electric. The host is weaving through all these crowded tables. Servers are balancing trays of drinks, and the kitchen is just humming like a perfectly tuned engine.
It looks great from the outside.
Exactly. You are looking at the beautiful plating, the speed of the service, the sizzle on the grill. But when a county health inspector walks through those swinging doors, they are not looking at the food.
No, they really aren't.
They are looking directly at the person calling the tickets. They are looking for the invisible architecture of management.
Because the visual of the food is honestly a distraction for an inspector. Yeah, totally. A shiny stainless steel counter or like a piping hot bowl of soup that only tells you what is happening in that singular frozen second in time.
Right. It just means they got it right that one time.
Exactly. Inspectors are trained to look past the symptoms and evaluate the actual systems.
Wow, okay.
If the underlying supervisory structure is compromised, a biological disaster isn't just a possibility. I mean, it is an inevitability waiting for the right shift.
That is terrifying. So today we are taking a deep dive into the 2022 FDA Retail Food Code.
The big one.
The big one.
Yeah.
And we are focusing specifically on the rules of supervision.
Yeah.
We are pulling apart item number 1 and item number 2 on the official health inspection compliance checklist.
Which are arguably the most important items on there.
Right. And by the time we are done here, you are going to understand exactly how state-level point deductions, which are tied solely to management, can absolutely devastate a restaurant's public letter grade.
It completely changes how you look at a restaurant window.
We are decoding the bureaucratic bedrock, keeping your takeout safe. We have this massive stack of sources detailing the shifting national regulations, the local grading math, and those new allergen updates.
Yeah, the sesame updates.
We will definitely get to the sesame stuff. But to make sense of any of this, we really have to start with the foundational text, the FDA Food Code itself.
Right.
Which, right out of the gate, operates on a premise that feels totally counterintuitive. It is actually not a federal law.
Yeah, that catches a lot of people off guard.
I mean, it caught me off guard.
Sure, because when you hear FDA Food Code, you naturally assume it carries the weight of a federal mandate.
Right. Like, They are dictating exactly how every diner, food truck, and grocery store from Seattle to Miami must operate.
But in reality, it is just a model.
Just a model.
Yeah, it is a comprehensive, scientifically optimized blueprint published by the Food and Drug Administration.
Okay, so what do they do with it?
Well, they provide this massive document to state, local, tribal, and territorial jurisdictions with the hope, but critically, not the mandate, that these local governments will adopt it into their own legal frameworks.
Wait, so the federal government spends years researching pathogens, testing cooking temperatures, analyzing supply chain risks to write the ultimate instruction manual for safe kitchens.
Yep.
But they literally don't have the authority to actually enforce it across the country.
Exactly. The enforcement of retail food safety in the U.S. falls overwhelmingly to state and local jurisdictions.
That is wild.
It is. The FDA just publishes the code. Right now, they are on a 4-year cycle.
Have they always done every 4 years?
No, actually, between 1993 and 2001, they pushed updates every 2 years.
Oh, wow.
But they shifted to a 4-year interval starting 2005.
Why slow it down?
Basically, to give states more time to catch up.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. The most recent full edition is the 2022 Food Code, which is the 10th edition.
And that was published when?
It was finalized and posted in January of 2023, and it represents the absolute cutting edge of food safety science.
You would think a state would see a brand new, scientifically backed safety manual from the federal government and just, immediately adopt it to protect their citizens.
You would think that, yeah.
But looking at the adoption map from the FDA's National Retail Food Team, it looks less like a unified national standard and more like a chaotic, fragmented patchwork.
I mean, patchwork is putting it mildly.
Really?
Oh, yeah. The FDA tracks the adoption status of every state and territory. And by the end of 2023, the number of states that had fully adopted the 2022 Food Code was remarkably low.
How low are we talking?
We're talking about 4 states.
Well, just 4 states.
Just 4. Colorado, Connecticut, Mississippi, and but overall, that means only 7.65% of the United States population is currently living under the most up-to-date food safety guidelines.
Only 7%. That means if I cross the border from Colorado into Kansas, the fundamental rules governing how the chicken on my plate is handled suddenly roll backward in time.
They roll back significantly because the dominant version across the country right now is actually the 2017 Food Code.
Okay, so 5 years out of date.
Right. 18 states are operating on that one, which covers about 40% of the population.
Okay, that's better, but still.
But the fragmentation goes way deeper. 13 states are still using the 2013 version.
Oh my God.
8 states are on the 2009 version.
2009?
Yep. If you go to Alaska or New Jersey, their health inspectors are enforcing the 2005 code.
That is almost 20 years ago.
And South Dakota is functioning under the 1995 version of the FDA Food Code.
1995. I mean, the science of microbiology and our understanding of foodborne pathogens has advanced light years since 1995.
Completely.
This sounds like the worst group project ever. The FDA writes a master instruction manual, and every state just grabs whatever chapter they feel like from whatever decade.
Basically, yeah. And we have to talk about California.
Oh, right, California. They have nearly 40 million residents. That's almost 12% of the U.S. population. And they aren't even on the map for the FDA Food Code.
California is the ultimate outlier. They are the sole state that has never adopted any version of the FDA model code.
Never.
Never. They rely entirely on their own massive state-specific framework called the California Retail Food Code.
Wow.
So when you combine California doing its own thing with the dozens of states lagging 5, 10, or 30 years behind the federal model, you realize that food safety is a highly localized, highly variable legal concept.
I really want to push on that. Why is there such a massive, persistent delay?
It comes down to bureaucracy.
But if a state health department knows the 2022 code is safer, what is actually stopping them from just pointing to the FDA website and saying, hey, we use that one now?
Because of how state laws are fundamentally structured. A state health department can't just decree a change. It has to go through the legislative or administrative rulemaking process. And the FDA data highlights 2 very different ways states handle this.
Okay, what are they?
The more efficient route is called short-form adoption, or adoption by reference. 21 states use this.
How does that work?
They essentially pass a short statute that says, we formally adopt the FDA Food Code of this specific year, subject to a few specific local amendments.
Okay.
It basically just points the state's legal authority directly to the federal document.
That seems logical. I mean, you don't need to rewrite the dictionary to use it.
You'd think so. But 27 states, along with Washington, D.C., use the long form or section-by-section method.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that sounds slow.
This is where the bureaucratic friction grinds everything to an absolute halt. When these states want to update their food code, they have to take the FDA's multi-100-page document and literally transcribe, debate, and integrate it line by line into their existing state legal statutes.
You are kidding, line by line.
Line by line. Every single temperature requirement, every definition of a pathogen has to go through the state's administrative meat grinder.
So it is not a scientific delay at all. It's purely a bureaucratic bottleneck. Politicians and state agencies have to spend thousands of hours arguing over the specific phrasing of hand-washing requirements that the FDA already perfected.
Exactly. And you add in the jurisdictional turf wars.
What do you mean?
Well, in a lot of states, food safety isn't controlled by a single entity. While 39 states have one agency handling restaurants and grocery stores, 12 states actually split the responsibility.
Like different agencies for different types of food?
Yeah. Florida has 3 different agencies regulating food. 2 use the short-form adoption method, 1 uses the long-form.
That sounds like a nightmare.
In New York, the Department of Health uses one version of the code, and the Department of Agriculture and Markets might use a totally different standard for grocery store delis.
That makes no sense.
You have departments fighting over budget, jurisdiction, and legal phrasing. That is exactly why it takes Kansas a decade to move from the 2009 code to the 2017 code.
Man, if the machinery of state government is really that slow, it begs a massive question.
Right.
For the 92% of the country not using the 2022 code, what are they actually missing? Like, if I am sitting in a restaurant in a state using the 2013 code, what safety net do I lack that someone in Colorado currently has?
That points us directly to the most significant substantive change in the 2022 Food Code.
Which is?
And it revolves around an issue that has become literally a matter of life and death for millions of Americans. Food allergies.
Allergies.
The 2022 Food Code formally elevated sesame to the status of a major food allergen, making it the 9th item on that highly restricted list.
It joins the heavy hitters. So the list is milk, egg, fish, crustacean shellfish, tree nuts, wheat, peanuts, soybeans, and now sesame.
Exactly. Starting January 1st, 2023, the federal government officially recognized the severity and prevalence of sesame allergies. The clinical data just showed that sesame allergy prevalence had reached a point where the risk of anaphylaxis was matching those other 8 major categories. The implications for the food industry under the 2022 code are monumental. If you are in a jurisdiction enforcing this code, any food item packaged at retail for sale to consumers must explicitly declare sesame on the warning label.
See, I was reading through the FDA's guidance on this rollout, and there is a massive supply chain loophole built into this that just feels incredibly dangerous for allergy sufferers.
Yeah, it's a huge issue.
Because the mandate only applies to foods packaged on or after January 4th, 2023.
That is a critical distinction that consumers with sesame allergies have to navigate right now. The FDA recognized the economic impossibility of forcing every grocery store and warehouse in America to pull billions of dollars of existing inventory off the shelves just to slap new stickers on them.
I mean, I get the economics, but still.
Foods with long shelf lives, like frozen items, canned goods, dry pastas that were packaged in December of 2022, they were legally allowed to remain in the marketplace until they expired.
So a consumer could walk into a store in late 2023 or even 2024, pick up a packaged item that contains sesame, check the bold allergen warning box on the back, see no mention of sesame, and assume it is safe, when in reality it was just packaged a few weeks before the legal deadline.
Yes. That is the grim reality of supply chain economics intersecting with public health regulation.
That is so scary.
The FDA actually advises consumers with sesame allergies to read the entire ingredient list, not just the bold allergen summary, because the word sesame might still be buried in the fine print under spices or natural flavors on older items.
Right, but what about unpackaged foods? Because you can't rely on an ingredient label if you are ordering a sandwich at a deli counter or scooping granola out of a gravity bin at the grocery store.
For unpackaged foods, the 2022 code is much stricter. The facility is required to provide written notification to the consumer regarding the presence of all 9 major food allergens.
So like a sign?
Yeah, this means putting it on the menu, setting up deli case placards, or using table tents. For bulk foods where the consumer dispenses it themselves, there must be a prominent label in plain view, explicitly naming the allergen sources.
We really have to talk about the industry's reaction to this because when the sesame rule was rolling out, multinational bakery and food manufacturing corporations did something completely counterintuitive.
It was wildly controversial.
Yeah, because the goal of this regulation was obviously to make the food supply safer for people with sesame allergies. But some companies realized that perfectly cleaning their manufacturing lines to prevent sesame from accidentally crossing over into non-sesame products was going to cost an absolute fortune.
Right. The concept is called cross-contact.
Explain how that works.
So in a massive commercial bakery, if you bake sesame seed buns on a conveyor belt in the morning, the dust and oils from those seeds linger. Sure. If you bake plain hamburger buns on that exact same belt in the afternoon, the plain buns are now contaminated with trace amounts of sesame.
And for someone with a severe allergy, that trace amount is enough to trigger an emergency.
Absolutely. To legally guarantee a product is sesame-free, a facility must implement extraordinarily rigorous, expensive, and time-consuming sanitization protocols between runs.
So instead of cleaning the equipment, some of these major manufacturers just started intentionally adding sesame flour to bakery products that never previously contained sesame.
It is a really dark display of compliance economics.
It's unbelievable.
If a manufacturer intentionally adds sesame to a plain white bread recipe, they can legally slap the word sesame right on the allergen warning label.
And then they are off the hook.
They are now fully in compliance with the FDA rules. By declaring it as an intentional ingredient, they completely absolve themselves of the massive liability and expense associated with accidental cross-contact.
They intentionally introduced an allergen into a safe food supply just to dodge the cost of cleaning their factories. That is such a regulatory backfire.
Yep.
Imagine a family that had been buying a specific brand of safe bread for a decade suddenly finds their child is having an allergic reaction, all because the manufacturer found a legal loophole.
From the perspective of bureaucratic compliance, the manufacturer followed the rules perfectly. They disclosed the ingredient. But from a public health perspective, it severely restricted the safe food options for an already vulnerable population.
Well, this raises a huge point. If multinational corporations with armies of compliance lawyers are struggling to manage these complex allergy regulations, how on earth is a local diner supposed to handle it?
It's tough.
Imagine a chaotic Friday night. The kitchen is swamped. A customer mentions a sesame allergy. How does the health department ensure that the 19-year-old line cook actually understands cross-contact, changes their gloves, and uses a sanitized cutting board?
And that brings us to the core philosophy of modern food safety. The FDA realized decades ago that you simply cannot regulate every single action of every single cook.
There are just too many of them.
Exactly. You have to regulate the structure that governs the cook. The 2022 Food Code explicitly mandates that employee food safety training programs must cover allergy awareness.
Okay, but who enforces that training? Who is actually watching the cook?
That points us directly to the apex of the inspection framework. Item number 1 on the standardized compliance checklist, the person in charge.
Let's break this down, because when a health inspector walks into a restaurant, they don't go check the walk-in refrigerator first. They don't check the dishwasher.
Although they don't.
They go straight to the top of the form, item 1, which reads, person in charge present, demonstrates knowledge, and performs duties.
Right. And it is marked strictly N or out to T of compliance. The logic is totally sequential. If item 1 is marked out T, the health inspector knows with almost absolute certainty that they're going to find critical biological hazards downstream.
It is the first domino.
The very first.
Let's look at the 3 pillars of item 1, because the legal requirements here are intense. Pillar 1 is simply presence.
Yes. The permit holder of the establishment must ensure a person in charge, or PIC, is physically present during all hours of operation.
Oh, hours.
Every single minute the doors are unlocked. A designated leader must be in the building.
Wow.
If a restaurant is open until midnight, but the general manager clocks out at 5 p.m., they must officially designate a night shift lead as the PIC.
So what happens if they don't? Like if the inspector walks in at 10 p.m., asks for the manager, and a cashier just shrugs and says, the boss went home, we're just running the floor.
That is an immediate failure of item 1.
Right on the spot.
Right on the spot. Because there is no chain of command. If an emergency happens, there is no one legally authorized or trained to make a structural decision.
That makes sense. But let's say the designated shift lead steps forward and says, hey, I'm the PIC. Now they have to face pillar 2, demonstration of knowledge.
This is where it gets hard.
Because you can't just wear the manager name tag, right? You have to prove you understand the science of food safety. How does an inspector actually test that on the spot?
The Food Code allows for 3 pathways to demonstrate knowledge. The first is observational.
Meaning they just watch them.
Well, if the inspector conducts their entire walkthrough and finds 0 priority violations, meaning the food is temping perfectly, hands are being washed, raw meat is separated, they can infer that the PIC has the necessary knowledge because the kitchen is functioning flawlessly.
Okay, so the proof is in the properly temperature-controlled pudding.
Exactly. The second way is by presenting a valid certificate as a certified food protection manager, which we will dissect shortly.
Right, the CFPM.
But the third way is essentially an intense on-the-spot oral examination by the health inspector.
A pop quiz in the middle of a Friday dinner rush.
A very stressful pop quiz.
What kind of questions are they asking? Are we talking about basic stuff like how long do you wash your hands?
No, it goes vastly deeper than that. The inspector can ask the PIC to explain the application of HACCP principles in their specific kitchen.
HACCP, you hear that acronym thrown around in the industry constantly. Hazard analysis and critical control point.
Yep.
What does that actually mean in the context of this pop quiz?
HACCP is a management system where food safety is addressed through the analysis and control of biological, chemical, and physical hazards. Instead of just reacting to a dirty kitchen, you map out the specific risk points in a recipe.
Give me an example.
Let's say a restaurant makes a massive 10-gallon batch of chili. The PIC must be able to explain the critical control points of that chili.
So a critical control point is like the specific step where the hazard is either eliminated or reduced to a safe level.
Precisely. For chili, cooking it to 165 degrees Fahrenheit to kill vegetative bacteria is a control point.
That part seems easy enough.
But the real danger, the one the inspector wants the PIC to explain, is cooling that massive pot down. If you just shove 10 gallons of hot chili into a walk-in cooler, the outside gets cold, but the center stays warm for days.
Because it's so dense.
Right. And that center becomes an incubator for spore-forming bacteria like Clostridium perfringens.
The temperature danger zone.
Exactly. Between 41 degrees and 135 degrees Fahrenheit. The PIC must confidently explain to the inspector that their HACCP plan requires a 2-stage cooling method.
What are the stages?
Dropping the chili from 135 to 70 degrees within 2 hours, and then from 70 to 41 degrees within the next 4 hours, usually by using ice wands or shallow metal pans.
Okay, so if the PIC stumbles on the biology of why that specific temperature curve matters, they fail the demonstration of knowledge.
Yes, they fail item 1.
That is heavy microbiology for a shift manager to memorize. But looking at the sources, the questioning gets even more intense when it comes to employee health.
The employee health policy is where many managers fail. The PIC must be able to state their legal responsibility to restrict or exclude employees who exhibit specific symptoms or have specific medical diagnoses.
The code specifically mentions jaundice, like a yellowish tint to the skin or the whites of the eyes. Why is jaundice singled out?
Because jaundice is the primary visible symptom of acute liver failure, which in a food service setting is a massive red flag for hepatitis A.
Wow, okay.
Hepatitis A is a highly contagious liver infection transmitted through the fecal-oral route.
So if a food worker has Hep A, uses the restroom, fails to wash their hands perfectly, and then handles a raw salad, they can infect dozens of customers.
Easily. And hepatitis A has a long latency period. People are contagious before they even feel sick. By the time they look jaundiced, they are a biological hazard.
So if a line cook comes in and looks yellow, the manager can't just say, hey, go rest in the back office.
No, absolutely not. The FDA code explicitly requires the PIC to instantly exclude that employee from the establishment and formally notify the local regulatory authority.
They have to call the health department.
The health department has to get involved to track a potential outbreak. The PIC must also know to exclude employees diagnosed with pathogens like norovirus, E. coli, salmonella, or Shigella.
So it's a test of protocol.
Right. If the inspector asks, what do you do if a server calls in and says they're diagnosed with norovirus, and the PIC says, I'll tell them to stay home for a couple of days, that is a failure.
Because they missed the legal notification requirement.
Exactly.
Okay, so a valid PIC has to be physically present, and they have to possess the microbiological and legal knowledge of a low-level public health official. What is the third pillar? Performs duties.
Because knowledge is useless if it isn't applied. The third pillar requires the execution of active managerial control.
Active managerial control.
This is a philosophical shift for a lot of managers. It means moving away from a reactive approach, waiting for a mess to happen, and then cleaning it up to a proactive system.
How does an inspector measure proactive, though?
Through observation of systems. When the inspector is standing in the kitchen, they're actively watching the PIC.
Oh, they are watching the manager, not just the food.
Exactly. Is the PIC actively monitoring employee hand washing? Are they verifying that cooks are using calibrated stem thermometers to check the internal temperature of chicken rather than just eyeballing it?
Right, like checking their work in real time.
Are they checking the concentration of the chemical sanitizer in the 3-compartment sink using test strips?
It makes me think of an orchestra conductor. The conductor isn't playing the violin, but if the violin section goes out of tune and the conductor doesn't immediately correct them, the conductor has failed.
That is a perfect analogy.
A kitchen manager who sits in the back office doing paperwork while the cooks cross-contaminate raw meat is failing at active managerial control.
And the FDA warns that a failure of item 1 creates a systemic collapse. If the person driving the ship doesn't know the rules of the road or isn't paying attention to the wheel, the ship is going to crash. That is why it is item 1.
But right beneath item 1 on the inspection form is item 2, and this is where I want to challenge the structure a bit because it feels a little redundant.
How so?
Well, item 2 requires a Certified Food Protection Manager, or CFPM. I understand the difference between a general manager and a Tuesday night shift lead, but legally, under the 2022 code, why force a small business to maintain 2 separate, distinct titles for supervision? Why isn't a knowledgeable PIC enough?
It is a great distinction to make. The difference lies in the depth of the validation and the scope of responsibility. Section 2102.11 of 3 Code mandates that an establishment must have at least 1 employee with supervisory and management responsibility who is a certified food protection manager.
So the PIC is the person on duty right now, keeping the immediate shift safe. The CFPM is the architect of the overall safety system for the entire restaurant.
Correct. You can designate any trained lead employee to be the PIC for a given 4-hour shift. But the restaurant, as a corporate entity, must have a CFPM on staff. And the barrier to becoming a CFPM is significantly higher than just passing the inspector's pop quiz.
Because the code specifies they must pass a test from an accredited program. I remember taking a food handler's course years ago for a summer job. I watched an hour-long video on a laptop, answered some incredibly obvious multiple-choice questions, and got a digital certificate. Does that make someone a CFPM?
Absolutely not. The code draws a hard legal line here. An accredited program does not refer to training functions or educational videos.
No, it doesn't.
No. A food handler's card is an educational certificate. A certified food protection manager must pass a secure, proctored evaluation.
Okay, so it's much more formal.
We were talking about rigorous exams administered by entities recognized by the Conference for Food Protection, like ServSafe, or the National Registry of Food Safety Professionals.
A proctored exam, meaning you have to sit down, under observation, and prove your comprehensive proficiency in foodborne disease prevention, HACCP design, and facility management. It is a professional credential, not just an attendance ribbon.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the data unequivocally supports this requirement. The FDA's own studies show that food establishments with a certified manager on site demonstrate a statistically significant reduction in the occurrence of critical foodborne illness risk factors.
Because they built the system.
The CFPM is the person who designs the cooling logs, writes the employee health policy, and trains the PICs.
Does every single place that sells a calorie of food need one of these highly certified managers? What if I run a tiny corner store that just sells prepackaged bags of chips, bottled water, and maybe some whole apples? Hiring a credentialed manager for that seems like overkill.
The code allows regulatory authorities to grant exemptions based on risk.
Oh, good.
If an establishment poses a minimal risk of causing foodborne illness based on the nature of its operations, meaning they are not cooking, cooling, or handling exposed, time and temperature-controlled foods, they can be exempted from the CFPM requirement.
But if you are slicing deli meat, tossing salads, or grilling burgers?
The requirement is absolute.
Okay, so we have mapped the architecture. The CFPM builds the safety systems, and the PIC executes those systems shift by shift. That all sounds very administrative.
It is, yeah.
If a restaurant fails these items, it means they have some paperwork issues or a manager quit and hasn't been replaced. To the average consumer, failing management sounds a lot less terrifying than a violation for rat infestation or raw sewage.
It might sound less terrifying in a conversational sense, but the mathematical reality of how state health departments penalize these administrative failures is absolutely brutal.
Really?
Oh, yeah. A failure in supervision can instantly trigger a cascade of point deductions that will destroy a restaurant's public letter grade faster than almost any physical hazard.
We need to look at the math of failure. How does this scoring actually work? Because the sources indicate that the FDA made a massive philosophical shift in how they evaluate risk, but the states handle the math differently.
Right. To understand the local math, you have to understand what the FDA abandoned.
What did they abandon?
Historically, the FDA model used a simple numerical demerit system. If a kitchen had a violation, the inspector subtracted 1, 2, 3, or 4 points from a starting score of 100.
Just a flat point system.
But the FDA realized that a flat point system didn't accurately reflect public health risk. Not all violations are equal.
So a broken floor tile shouldn't carry the same mathematical weight as an employee sneezing on a prep table.
Exactly. So the FDA completely ditched the numerical points. Instead, they categorized every single violation into one of 3 risk buckets: priority, priority foundation, and core.
Let's define these buckets. What triggers a priority violation?
A priority item is a provision that directly contributes to the elimination or prevention of hazards associated with foodborne illness.
Okay, so the immediate threats.
These are the immediate critical threats. If an inspector sees raw chicken juice dripping onto a tray of ready-to-eat lettuce, or finds a pot of soup holding at 95 degrees perfect breeding temperature for bacteria, that is a priority violation.
How fast do they have to fix that?
The danger is present right now. The corrective action must happen immediately or within 72 hours.
What about priority foundation?
Priority foundation items are the systems that support or enable the priority items.
Like what?
For example, a hand-washing sink must have soap and paper towels. The lack of soap is not going to directly poison a customer.
Right.
But without soap, the employee cannot effectively wash their hands, which prevents them from controlling the hazard. It is a foundational failure.
So they get a little more time to fix it.
These usually require correction within 10 to 15 calendar days.
And the lowest level, core.
Core items relate to general sanitation, facility maintenance, and standard operating procedures. A cracked floor tile, a dusty ventilation hood, or a missing light shield.
Stuff that's gross but not deadly.
Right. They don't pose an immediate biological threat to the food, so the timeline for correction is much longer, usually up to 90 days.
The FDA's 3-bucket system makes perfect scientific sense. It triages the danger. But whenever I see a news report about a health inspection, or I look at the window of a restaurant, I don't see priority foundation. I see a letter grade. I see score, 82. If the federal government stopped using points, where are these numbers coming from?
This brings us right back to the patchwork reality of state implementation.
Of course it does.
The FDA can philosophically abandon points all they want, but state and local health departments have to communicate risk to the public in a way the public instantly understands.
Right. And consumers understand a 100-point scale. We are trained from elementary school to know that an A is good, a B is acceptable, and a C is bad.
So local jurisdictions take the FDA's 3 risk categories and translate them backward into numerical point deductions.
And this is where failing the management requirements, items 1 and 2, becomes financially and publicly devastating for a restaurant owner.
In traditional 100-point state systems, failing to have a present knowledgeable PIC or failing to have a CFPM on staff are classified as high-risk critical violations. And the local math penalizes these failures with massive point deductions, usually 4 to 5 points per violation.
Out of a 100-point total, that is a massive hit.
Let's look at the compound effect. Imagine an inspector walks in at 8 p.m. The general manager quit a week ago, so there is no certified food protection manager employed by the facility.
So item 2 is marked OUT.
That is a 4 or 5 point deduction. Then, the person currently running the shift is a 19-year-old server who panics when asked about the cooling parameters for chili and admits they don't know the employee health policy for jaundice.
They fail the demonstration of knowledge.
Item 1 is marked OUT. That is another 4 or 5 point deduction.
So a total deduction of 8 to 10 points?
Instantly. Before the inspector has stepped into the walk-in cooler, before they have tempted a single piece of meat, the restaurant's score has dropped from a perfect 100 down to a 90 or 92.
They drop a full letter grade from an A to a B, strictly because the structural management was absent. The food could literally be perfect, the kitchen could be spotless, but because the invisible architecture collapsed, their public grade plummets.
The SAIDs do this intentionally. They are penalizing the root cause of danger, not just the physical symptom. If the management is broken, the safety of the food is a temporary illusion.
Do you have a specific example of this math?
Let's look at how a specific local jurisdiction codifies this math. We can look at the city of Fishers in Indiana.
How does Fishers translate the federal code into a local grade?
They base their rules on the Indiana Retail Food Code. Every establishment starts a routine inspection with a perfect 100 points. They map the violations to the FDA's 3 tiers. In Fishers, a priority violation costs a business 5 points. A priority foundation violation costs 3 points.
So failing the foundational management requirement of a PIC immediately strips 5 points away.
Yes. And Fishers enforces public visibility. Since 2023, they have mandated the posting of a bright, color-coded Fishers sanitation grade placard right at the entrance.
The dreaded window letter.
A green A is 90 to 100 points. A yellow B is 80 to 89 points. A red C is 70 to 79. The health department's stated goal is education and compliance. They even offer mock inspections to help businesses prepare.
That's nice of them.
But when the official inspection happens, the math is unforgiving. If you lose your management points, you are teetering on the edge of a yellow B placard before the kitchen inspection even really begins.
And a yellow B placard on the front door of a high-end restaurant on a Friday night is going to drive customers away. It is an economic penalty driven by a public shaming mechanism.
It creates intense compliance pressure. But if you think a 5-point deduction in Indiana is steep, we have to examine the mathematical nightmare that Los Angeles County uses.
Well, LA County, California uses its own state code, right?
Yes, but their local jurisdictions construct grading matrices that heavily compound point penalties when systems completely fail.
Walk me through the LA County math, because the sources paint a picture of a system designed to rapidly escalate consequences.
LA County categorizes their most severe infractions as major critical risk violations. This includes things like employees not washing their hands, storing food at improper hot or cold holding temperatures, or using improper cooking times.
Okay, the really bad stuff.
When an inspector marks a major critical risk violation, it results in a flat 4-point deduction from the inspection score.
Okay, minus 4 points. That is similar to the FDA priority tier in other states.
The base penalty is similar, but LA County implements a devastating mathematical modifier.
A modifier.
There are specific extreme hazards that force an immediate suspension of a restaurant's health permit. The 3 big ones are no water available, a sewage backup, or a vermin infestation.
Let's pause on those because those aren't just violations. Those are physical barriers to operation. If a restaurant has no water, they physically cannot wash their hands or sanitize dishes. If a sewer line backs up into the kitchen drains, the biological contamination is everywhere. And vermin rats or cockroaches means the facility's physical envelope is breached.
Exactly. If one of those closure types occurs, the permit is suspended and the restaurant is closed. The base penalty for a closure violation is 4 points.
Okay, it's just 4 points for rats. That seems low.
However, the LA County modifier rule states that if a permit is suspended for a closure type, and the inspector finds 2 or more additional major critical risk violations during that same inspection, an additional 7 points are deducted for each closure type marked.
Wait, they compound the penalty based on concurrent failures?
Yes.
Show me how this math actually plays out in a real kitchen scenario.
Let's walk through an example provided by LA County Public Health to illustrate the compounding damage. An inspector arrives at a facility, they probe a batch of chicken and find it was undercooked.
Yikes.
That is a major critical risk violation for cooking temperatures. Minus 4 points.
Okay, the score drops from 100 to 96.
The inspector continues and finds a box of produce that is rotting and adulterated. Another major critical risk violation for food condition. Minus 4 points.
Down to 92. In most jurisdictions, they are still holding on to a low A grade.
Then the inspector goes to the hand washing sink, turns the knob, and nothing comes out. The facility's water main is broken. There is no water available. This immediately triggers a permit suspension. The base penalty for lacking water is minus 4 points. But because the permit is suspended for a closure type, AD, the inspector, already marked 2 other major critical risk violations, the chicken and the produce. The 7-point modifier is activated.
So the water violation is no longer just minus 4. It is the base 4 plus the 7-point modifier. That single violation is now a minus 11-point hit. We are down a total of 19 points. The score plummets to an 81. They just barely have a B.
And then, while looking under the dry storage racks, the inspector finds a nest and fresh rodent droppings. Vermin infestation. The base penalty for rodents is minus 4 points. But because vermin infestation is also a designated closure type, it triggers its own 7-point modifier. Another minus 11 points.
Wow. So let's add this up. Undercooked chicken is minus 4. Bad produce is minus 4. No water triggers the modifier, so that is minus 11. Rodents trigger a second modifier, so that is another minus 11.
Yep.
4 plus 4 plus 11 plus 11, that is a staggering 33-point deduction.
A 33-point deduction on a single inspection. The restaurant scores a 67. They are instantly slapped with a C grade, their permit is suspended, their doors are padlocked, and even when they fix the plumbing and call an exterminator to reopen, that C grade hangs in their window, destroying public trust.
Brutal.
The LA County math is designed to surgically punish systemic, multi-layered failures.
It is mathematical ruin for failing to maintain the facility's fundamental architecture. So, zooming out from the math, what is the ultimate takeaway for you, the listener, the person grabbing a burger or ordering takeout tonight? Why does this labyrinth of state adoption codes and compounding local math matter to your everyday life?
It should completely shift your paradigm on how you interpret the public signals of food safety. When you walk up to a restaurant and see a B or a C placard on the front door, the natural human instinct is to imagine the worst physical hazards.
Right. Our brains instantly go to the grossest possible scenario. We assume a B grade means the food is inherently dirty, like there are rats everywhere.
But once you understand the architecture of the FDA Food Code, and you see how heavily state and local systems weight the supervisory requirements of items 1 and 2, you realize that a B grade often tells a totally different story.
What could it mean?
It might not mean the kitchen is filthy. It could literally mean that the restaurant is in a strict jurisdiction, the certified food protection manager was out sick, and the nervous shift lead couldn't confidently articulate the multi-stage cooling parameters of HACCP or the legal reporting requirements for jaundice to a health inspector.
They lost 10 points purely on administrative and cognitive noncompliance. The counters were spotless, the chicken was temped perfectly, but the brain of the kitchen was temporarily disconnected, so the grade crashed.
Exactly. The letter grade is not just a snapshot of physical cleanliness. It is a measurement of systemic resilience. It is an evaluation of whether the restaurant possesses the structural leadership required to guarantee that the food will still be safe tomorrow or next week when the inspector is no longer standing in the kitchen watching them.
We have covered an incredible amount of ground today. We started by demystifying the FDA Food Code itself, realizing it is just a federal blueprint, and exploring the chaotic, decades-long lag in state-by-state adoption caused by grueling bureaucratic rulemaking.
We examined the 2022 updates, specifically the elevation of sesame to the 9th major food allergen, the supply chain loopholes of packaging dates, and the disturbing economic reality of manufacturers intentionally adding allergens to avoid the massive liabilities of cross-contact.
Which led us to the absolute core of the inspection process, supervision. We broke down the 3 pillars of Item 1, learning how a person in charge must demonstrate intense microbiological knowledge and execute active managerial control. We contrasted that with the overarching legal necessity of a credentialed, certified food protection manager in Item 2.
And finally, we decoded the brutal mathematics of local grading. We saw how the FDA's transition to risk categories translates into massive point deductions at the local level, where failing management can strip 10 points instantly, and how jurisdictions like LA County use compound modifiers to mathematically devastate restaurants experiencing systemic collapses.
We have made the invisible architecture of the kitchen visible. But before we finish, I want to pivot back to something we touched on at the very beginning, because looking at the totality of these sources, a glaring contradiction emerges. What is the final thought you want to leave with the audience today?
We have spent all this time dissecting the rigorous, scientifically precise nature of these grading systems. We discussed how heavily they penalize a lack of structural management. But consider the macro reality we established in the beginning. California, with nearly 40 million people and a massive restaurant industry, has not adopted a single version of the FDA Food Code.
Right.
And across the rest of the country, only 7% of the population is actually being protected by the up-to-date science of the 2022 code, while millions of others are governed by rules written when dial-up internet was cutting edge.
So what's the takeaway?
So the question to ponder is this. When you look at an A grade in a restaurant window in Los Angeles and an A grade in a window in Denver, they are built on entirely different foundational texts. Are the letter grades in our windows actually measuring an objective, universal standard of food safety? Or are they merely measuring localized compliance with whatever fragmented bureaucracy happens to hold jurisdiction in that specific zip code?
That is a phenomenal question. It completely destabilizes the concept of a standardized grade. It is not just about the science of the food. It is about the geography of the law. That is certainly something to chew on. Next time you grab takeout, Take a second to look at that placard in the window. You aren't just looking at a letter anymore. You are looking at a complex web of legislation, microbiology, and management math, and you know exactly who is calling the tickets. Until next time.
Thank you for our host today for the great information and discussion about the Supervision requirement in retail food service in the 2022 FDA Food Code. In the kitchen, mise en place means everything in its place. It is the invisible backbone that keeps a brutal Friday night rush from collapsing into absolute chaos. Here at HRB Universal, we know that exact same principle applies directly to your leadership. True operational excellence, bulletproof compliance, and guest safety are never accidents. They are meticulously prepped before the doors ever open. You've been listening to the Mise En Place Culture First podcast, the show designed specifically for hospitality owners, operators, and managers who are ready to move past superficial checklists and build a non-negotiable standard of operational excellence. Today, we launched into a critical breakdown that hits your bottom line exactly where it hurts: supervision under Chapter 2 of the 2022 FDA Food Code. We didn't just talk about keeping a casual eye on the line. We pulled back the curtain on supervision, FDA rules, and state point deductions explained. When a health inspector walks through your back door, the first thing they look for isn't the temperature of your walk-in. It's the presence, knowledge, and active control of your person in charge. Under 2022 FDA standards, supervision is a non-negotiable core intervention. The hard truth: if your PIC cannot demonstrate knowledge, or if they fail to actively monitor critical food safety duties, you aren't just looking at a minor citation. You are looking at massive, immediate state point deductions that can tank your inspection score and put your brand's reputation on the line. What we unpack today: the blueprint, the exact definition of a person in charge under Section 2 to 101.11, the inspection criteria, the three core pillars inspectors grade: presence, demonstration of knowledge, and duties, the financial risk, how state regulatory agencies translate these FDA guidelines into devastating point deductions on your inspection report, the solution: how to transition your management style from passive firefighting to true active managerial control. If you want to protect your food service license, secure your brand, and keep your doors open, you have to get your leadership mise en place. Thank you for tuning in, for leaning into the prep, and for putting culture first. Be sure to subscribe so you never miss a shift. Leave us a review if today's insights helped your operation, and check the show notes for resources to help train your team. Get your leadership in place, keep your standards high, and we will see you next week. Whether you're commuting to the unit or relaxing at home, we've got you covered. Headphone on the go? Subscribe and listen via Riverside and MiseEnPlaceCultureFirst.com or our main website at hrbuni.com. You can also find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, Amazon Music, Audible, iHeartRadio, Deezer, or wherever you get your audio fix. TV on the big screen? Level up your experience by watching the podcast on the HRB TV network. Lightbulb pro tip: if you use Roku or Fire TV, simply search for HRB TV Network to start streaming directly from your living room.